Hey everybody, it's Brian and Jeff here on Real Hawk Talk, and we're here on Halloween Eve, Halloween here. Appreciate those folks that are tuning in, and appreciate Jeff, the one Hawk blogger person on the crew who's available tonight. We have an awesome show. We've got a really special guest, Dave Boling, formerly of the Tacoma News Tribune. Former offensive lineman back when he played, not in the NFL, but a lineman nonetheless. Really great insights into the Seahawks. Covered them for many years. Super smart guy, novelist. Really looking forward to having him. Before we get going, though, as always, please, as a reminder, click the subscribe button. It'd be great to grow the base. The more people that subscribe, the more great guests we can bring on. And the more value we can bring to all of you talking about the Hawks. So please do that. Please retweet and share the show. Let's get as many people here as we can. And if you aren't already, what's keeping you guys? Join the Hawk Blogger Insiders crew. Patreon.com, patreon.com/HawkBlogger. Can join, get part of an insider Facebook group. Get more access to us, talk about what's going on, meet other fans. The place is a little friendlier than Twitter can be. All of us are here to be, meet each other and just talk Hawks and talk about what we do. And it's been great to have that this year. And there's some other bonuses in there as well. So please join up. All proceeds go to Ben's fund, go to charity. So it's a great way to get a little bit additional Seahawks coverage and contribute to a great cause. So with that, Jeff Simmons, what is going on, dude? How are you feeling?
Dude, the last 3 days have been a total roller coaster. Just for Sunday had to be maybe I would argue the craziest Seahawks regular season game, maybe throughout the Pete Carroll era, maybe since I've been watching the team. It reminded me a lot of that Pittsburgh game a couple years ago. I think I tweeted out during the game. There were so many similarities to that game, but man, watching Wilson and Watson play in that game was unbelievable. And just the twists and turns in that game and just the crazy swings from that late interception, the last minute touchdown. I just couldn't get over it. I'm still reeling from how crazy that game was. And I know the NFL Network's playing a replay tonight, and I was hoping to catch that. I taped it, but man, that was nuts. And we've been waiting to see that from this great Russell Wilson game all year. And I would argue that's the best game he's ever played in the NFL.
It's hard to argue with that. What stood out to you the most about, what jumped out to you about how he played?
What jumped out the most was how good his deep ball accuracy was, how good he was, how concise he was with his throws. All year, me and you have been talking about how we want to see that Russell from 2015 who's reading the defense, making those quick reads, getting the ball out quickly, accurately. And early in the year, he was struggling with that. But this was the 2015 Russell, probably a better version than the one we saw. And the way he kept bouncing back and kept playing from behind, and all the deep balls he was hitting on. The deep ball accuracy had been a thing we'd been wondering about lately. And to see him bounce back with that kind of performance was off the charts. I don't think he's ever played a game that good.
Yeah, I think one of the things that Russell has always been special with is his ability to throw a really catchable deep ball. And, what do I mean when I say that? There are guys that will throw it on a line. There are guys that will hit a player in stride. They're looking for a specific run underneath kind of deep throwers. What Russell Wilson does really well is he throws a ball with a lot of trajectory, a lot of height that is really accurate. It comes down, it comes down right at a place where the receivers are often able to get position. And if they are good at high pointing the ball, if they're able to be the type of player that can jump, catch it at its highest point, and outmuscle the defender for it, there's a lot of yards to be gained there. I mean, Golden Tate, Pro Bowl receiver now, a lot more notoriety, but he was not a very good receiver when he came into the league, but he did one thing really well, and that was, even though he was 5'10", the guy could out-jump and out-muscle and high-point the ball. That was a big part of how he and Russell became such a great duo. honestly, I don't think they've had anyone that's been able to replicate that since he left. Closest might have been, Jermaine Kearse had one year where he kind of did it, and then really fell off. I think that was a huge part of how he fell out of favor, is he just wasn't able to do that as often. And the other guy was one game, Chris Matthews in the Super Bowl. Those are the only two guys that I think have done it with any regularity.
And what was just so amazing about that game from Russell is just he got absolutely nothing from the running game. That was probably the worst collective game from the running backs all season. The run blocking was atrocious. And the left tackle last week, Reese, after a great game against the Giants, totally whiffed against Jadeveon Clowney. And it's not an easy matchup, obviously, but Clowney owned him on several occasions. To do that with that kind of performance, where you're getting absolutely nothing from the running game, he pretty much carried the team, and it just makes that offseason narrative where the defense doesn't like Russell and they're carrying the team and he's not pulling his weight. Maybe that was a thing that was going on, and that just looked laughable on Sunday. And Russell, as much as I've complained about some of his early games, I think he's put himself maybe in the MVP conversation the last 2 weeks.
Absolutely.
Kind of crazy. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Who's doing more on an individual basis right now for their team, considering, the offensive line's been on the left tackle position a total disaster. The running game has been as bad as it's ever been in the Pete Carroll era. To do what he's done the last 2 weeks, especially this last game where Deshaun Watson had an unbelievable game. Yeah, he's right up in there with Tom Brady, I think, right now.
Yeah, you got Carson Wentz, you got Tom Brady, and you've got, I think, Russell Wilson. And Wilson is number 2 in the NFL right now in passing yards per game. You've got Tom Brady, who leads, I think he's at 317 yards a game. Russell's right at like 286 or something like that. Wentz is down at 257. But, Wentz has got 19 touchdowns. Russell's got 15. Brady's got 16. So, you can never argue with Tom Brady winning an MVP. The guy is the best player that's ever played the game. And as much as I'd love him not to win again, this Patriots team is struggling as well. That defense, they just lost Donta Hightower. That story is going to get lost in the mix this week with all the other news. Yeah. That's a huge loss to the Patriots. The Patriots absolutely 100% do not win either of their last 2 Super Bowls if Donta Hightower is not on that roster. So, Brady's going to have to do more, I think, even than he's done in the past to keep that team, at the top of the AFC East. And I think they've got some reasonable challengers in what the Bills and the Jets are going to provide.
Yeah, and the correct thing about Brady right now, if we're talking MVP, is that I think their defense is ranked 32nd in DVOA and their offense is ranked 1st. That's just crazy. The way Bill Belichick builds his teams, he's a defensive guy. They're terrible on defense. Even when they had Hightower, now they're abysmal on defense.
Yeah. I think that's a team that's part of what is so exciting about where the Seahawks are. Is like
exactly.
I tend to, really, last year, it was a year where, as a Seahawks fan, you really just had to buy in the idea of it's better to be hopeful than to be pessimistic. But realistically, you look at the Atlanta Falcons, you're like, that offense is way better than either our defense or our offense. It just was a better unit. Same thing about the Patriots offense. Now, we went in there last year and beat them in New England, and that was great. But, that's a tough team. And so this year you look around and the Eagles are getting hype. It's convenient because they're the only one-loss team. But is anyone really scared of the Eagles? Like, are they dominant in any way? The Chiefs, they were looking like the dominant team or close to it. Their defense is pretty terrible right now. The Patriots defense, as you mentioned, is down. Look, the Eagles, the Falcons, they got to come to Seattle this year. The Cowboys are down and could be without Zeke for the next 6 weeks. The Saints. Who's the challenger here other than the Eagles to what the Seahawks should be able to do?
Yeah, and I think John Schneider agrees with your view, and I think that's why they've been so aggressive this year in how they've been handling these trades in the season. And right now, you're right. Who's got a better shot right now than the Seahawks, especially when Russell's playing like this? Because all summer, the first 4 or 5 games of the year, we were saying that one thing that makes this team a Super Bowl team is Russell Wilson. They got a good to great defense. They got a ton of skill position talent. The offensive line seems like it's starting to come around. I don't want to say that. I'm scared to say it, but Russell's what takes this team over the top. And when he's playing like that, the Seahawks can beat anyone, especially in this NFL right now where there is no great team. And you mentioned Atlanta. Atlanta's looked pretty terrible this year. I know some of their underlying numbers are pretty decent, but other than that, their one, I think, game on Sunday night, they haven't played even a good game this year. And Green Bay's without Rodgers. Carolina traded Kelvin Benjamin today. New Orleans, I don't know. They just don't. I'm not a believer yet. They have some good players. Arizona's a fraud. The Rams are good, but
Rams are a good one, right? Like the Rams are legit.
Yeah, Rams are good.
I think the Rams, they beat Jacksonville on the road. I don't think that's an easy thing to do. They beat the Cowboys on the road with pretty much the full complement of Cowboy players. And when the Seahawks went into play the Rams in LA, all the Rams defensive numbers were down in the low 20s, even the 30s. They were like one of the worst defenses statistically in the NFL. But really, since the second half against Dallas, that defense has been one of the top 5 in the NFL. I think DVOA, they're like 3 or something like that. I mean, they're super high up there in terms of the quality of that defense. So I think they're legit. I think their offense is good, and against most teams is going to be good enough. If not, it's going to overwhelm them. And against good defenses like the Jaguars and against the Seahawks, they'll struggle. I don't think that Goff is good enough. But they're absolutely, with their schedule and that team, they could maybe lose 1 or 2 more games. I'm happy that the Seahawks get them at home as well.
Yeah, and the cool thing about the Seahawks, and I guess the Rams to an extent, is they have so many different ways they can win. And the last couple of weeks, what we've been talking about lately has been how great the defense is. They were fantastic against the Giants, albeit they don't have much talent there. The Rams game, they pretty much won on their own with all those turnovers. And now this game, the defense it's not an easy assignment to play Deshaun Watson. The way he plays is actually a terrible matchup for how Seattle plays. Pete Carroll historically has struggled with mobile quarterbacks that can move around the pocket. Everyone remembers the Vince Young USC game. Alex Smith always gave this defense trouble, even in the Harbaugh years, although he's able to roll out and extend the play. But now all of a sudden the offense looks like a juggernaut. And yeah, Houston's missing Watt. They're missing Merciless. They're not great in the secondary, but man, I was blown away by just how good Paul Richardson looked, how good Tyler Lockett looked. Doug Baldwin didn't even dominate like he has the last couple of weeks, but man, these guys got crazy weapons. Tanner McAvoy got down the field. J.D. McKissick's a weapon in the passing game. Jimmy Graham had those 2 touchdowns, although he wasn't covered on the last one. Man, these guys are scary when they're rolling like that.
Yeah, look, I wrote about it today, and we'll get into it a little bit more with Dave here in a few minutes when he joins. But since I think it's week 3, the Seahawks are the 3rd highest scoring offense. They're averaging 30.8 points a game, and the 2nd most prolific yardage offense at 411 yards a game or something like that. So this has been a unconventionally dominant offense. It took really the last few weeks for that to click in, but they've scored over 40 points in their last 2 home games. Their only game under 425 yards of offense in the past 5 was against the Rams. And even then, they were able to put it down a 75-yard drive to get a touchdown in a game that they needed it, and, got a few field goals. So, yeah, I think the offense is looking really good, and the overreaction this week that we will see, I've already seen, is, oh, but the defense, what's wrong with the defense? They gave up 38 points. Well, look, you can't go from being number 1 in the NFL in scoring defense 1 week ago to being a major problem now. That just doesn't jive. So I see that the defense is still good. I'm not too worried about them. Are they absolutely dominant. Maybe, maybe not. I think they still can be. And people forget 5 sacks, 3 interceptions, a defensive touchdown. Seahawks don't win that game. No matter how well Russell Wilson played, they don't win that game if the defense doesn't make those plays. And they did. So I think that matters as well.
Yeah, I came away from that game not discouraged at all by the defense. I was pretty encouraged by a lot of things I saw. I just thought it was a bad matchup with how Seattle runs their scheme with Watson, Fuller, and Hopkins. And those are great players that have beaten every defense right now. And we talked about the dangers Deshaun Watson posed last week, and he was way better than I thought he would be. And I was blown away with how well Frank Clark played. He's been an absolute terror since taking over for Cliff Averill. And I thought Dwight Freeney looked pretty good off the edge. And I think now, I know Earl Thomas is a little banged up, but I still think against a normal team without those crazy receivers on the outside and Deshaun Watson, who's legitimately an MVP candidate right now, I think Seattle will be a good to great defense all season long, especially at home.
Yeah, it's a great call out on Frank Clark. One of the interesting stats that came out was from Pro Football Focus that had him as having the best pass rushing performance of any individual on any team all season against the Texans. So that's pretty impressive. There's a lot of great pass rushers in the NFL, and there's been some great weeks for different folks. And for Frank Clark to have the best, I think that's an interesting topic I'm really curious about. One of the things that people haven't paid attention to as much is Dwight Freeney coming in meant that Frank Clark shifted to the left side to rush. So Freeney's been on the right, Clark moved over to the left, and be interesting to see if, the impact of that in terms of his pass rush. Obviously, when Cliff Averill was around, Clark was doing a lot of rushing from the left side. Averill preferred the right. It might be a better setup. Clark might be more productive in that kind of situation. And the pass rush was pretty darn good. Given how much Houston was max protecting.
Yeah, and it's going to be a really fun game next week against Washington for the pass rush. Trent Williams, the left tackle, is banged up. I don't think he's going to play. Brandon Scherf, their stud guard, he's banged up. I don't think he's going to play. And now another quiet thing from the game was Michael Bennett looked probably the best he's looked all year. He had a big run stuff in the last series of the drive. He was getting penetration all game. He was active. When you have him, Clark, Freeney, and Sheldon Richardson, we're still waiting to see that dominant rush, that dominant sack. But he's been a really solid player, not a great player. And Jaron Reed. This is a really, really good defensive line. And that might be the strength of their defense right now.
Yeah, it's especially we'll see what happens with the Earl Thomas injury.
We'll get into that.
That's important, obviously. I think we'd all hope that this team's a little bit better equipped to handle an injury like that with Bradley McDougald, who has been a starter in this league before, to come in and fill in. But Earl's, everybody knows, absolutely crucial to this defense. And if it means him taking a week to make sure that he's fully healed, I sure hope they do it. I mean, the guy's a speed player. He's a fast twitch player. Let's keep it as a low-grade hamstring strain and not make it more serious. Having said that, I've talked to a number of these guys enough to know that's not how they're wired. That's not how they –
Definitely not Earl either.
No. I mean, from the receivers to the cornerbacks to even all of them. I mean, Michael Bennett playing with a plantar fascia injury. So, we'll see. We'll see. I'm concerned.
Well, before Dave comes on, we haven't even talked about the story of the week. And obviously Russell Wilson was off the charts good, but the Seahawks made a big trade yesterday. Monday, was it? I think it officially came through today. Duane Brown, the guy you've been talking about all summer since George Fant went down, gets traded. I don't know if everyone has seen this, but Jeremy Lane did fail his physical, and the terms of the initial trade have changed. So now Seattle's giving up a 3rd-round pick this year, a 2nd-round pick next year, and receiving a 5th-round pick this year, and Jeremy Lane is still on the roster. They have to figure out what to do there. They have an extra roster spot now, but man, you wrote on this today. This is a game-changing move. This is a move that completely could change the course of the season. Look at who Seattle's had at
Yeah,
left tackle, man.
it
Reese
is.
Odiamo, Bradley Sowell, George Fant, who's never played football before. Now you got a all-pro player at left tackle. Like, what a game changer that is.
It's huge. And for those folks that are waiting for Dave, Dave's having a little technical difficulties getting on. He's still working on it, so you might see me trying to do some tech support for Dave as we're talking here. But we've been talking about Duane Brown for a while, right? We knew that the Seahawks had a real issue once Fant went down, and I knew from early on that Brown was a guy that they were interested in targeting and had early conversations about him. And I think that this is a guy that didn't frankly want to be in Houston anymore from what I can tell, and is high enough quality, still at a high enough level, and the type of player, played in his own blocking scheme, good run blocker, good pass blocker, quality individual. You could go on down the list, and we will. He brings so much to the table for this team, not just being a great player at the left tackle spot, but how he can impact the younger players. This is the youngest offensive line in the league, and he's coming in there and now gets to be a rock solid contributor, which, as we'll talk about, just has so many downstream impacts to how you can scheme around that and how you can move protection to help other guys on the line that might need it more than he does.
And I know Rob Rank was tweeting this out today because I rewatched the game, and I was really impressed with Brown, especially a guy who hasn't played all summer, not training camp, Seattle defensive line in Seattle. That's not an easy matchup, but just looking at how easily he moves defensive linemen off the line of scrimmage and how good he looks in the run game and how much space he creates. And like, Seattle had Russell Okung for most of the Carroll era, and he was up and down with injuries. He really only had one great season, a lot of good seasons, but I think a lot of us fans just undervalued the luxury of having a really good, stable left tackle because we saw what it got like when we lost one. And the last 2 years had been a total disaster. I mentioned those names before. Those are guys who are grading in the bottom of the league. I don't think any of them are starting players. To get a guy like this as your left tackle, at least for the next 2 seasons, it's such a difference maker for Russell. It's such a difference maker for the run game. Play action, deep shots. The big thing Russell couldn't do in a lot of the early games is he didn't have time to look down the field and go through his reads, and he was rushing his throws. This just – it almost makes the whole line better. It makes everyone better because you're not having guys whiff off the bat at left tackle on the blind side, and this is so important for what the Seahawks want to be and for the offensive production. It's such a game-changing move for the Seahawks, and it was a really great trade despite the price.
Yeah, we'll talk about that a little bit too.
Yeah,
Jeremy Lane can't even leave town in a way that helps the Seahawks.
He can never leave you.
Look, it's not just getting a really high quality left tackle. It is who you're replacing. Reese Odiamo, second year player. He's a 3rd round pick. Obviously, you hope for him to turn things around or start getting traction. Clearly, he's not ready to play. Certainly not ready to start. Yeah. And the team, the way I look at it and the way I kind of wrote about it this morning was, people are going to say this was, oh, Duane Brown came in and saved the Seahawks offense. What did we just talk about? The Seahawks offense, here's a stat that to me blows my mind, and I haven't heard it, repeated enough, but I wrote it on Sunday night. This offense has gained more yards through 7 games than any Seahawks offense other than the 2005 squad in the history of the franchise.
That's crazy.
That's crazy, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that when you're going from an offense that's already starting to pick up that kind of steam, and then take the player who is the worst player out of all 22 on the field, especially all 11 on offense, and you replace him with a guy who now isn't just the best on the offensive line. You could argue he's the 3rd best player on the offense. That's just a massive upgrade. And kudos to John Schneider for finding a way to do it.
Yeah, it's hard to find a reason not to like the trade. I know Brown's 32 years old, but I don't know. I can't think of any reason why you wouldn't want to upgrade such an important position that's been such a black hole for the Seahawks the last couple of years. I don't care what they gave up. They got Duane Brown and they got a left tackle that can play. It makes such a world of difference. Now the big question is, how do you get the run game going? Because we're going to get into this later probably with Dave, and we're going to have to talk about this later. If there's one negative to take away from the Houston game, I don't think it's the defense. I think it's how bad the run blocking was and how bad all of the running backs looked. They were a total zero. They were, 0.1 yards a carry for most of the game? I'm almost at the point. Remember in 2007, Mike Holmgren had those 4 receivers. It was Ingram, Hackett, Burleson, and Branch, and pretty much Sean Alexander was on his last legs. Hutchinson was gone. He's like, all right, we're pretty much ditching the run game entirely. I can't see Pete doing that, but at some point maybe you do. I know running's so important to what their philosophy, but man, I'm stumped what to do there. I don't know. Chris Carson was a bigger loss than I even thought.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, that's been a major blow to how the offense is functioning, and I think they were getting close to him, in terms of having some productivity. I think Luke Jokel being injured, that's one thing that he's doing better than Bosick. That's something that I told. I mean, we talked about it during training camp when I was scouting Ethan Bosick. What I saw right away is this guy is absolutely a better pass blocker than most of the guys on that line. Not very strong in the run. It's not that he gets knocked over the way Jokel did at times, but he just does. He's not a road grader. He doesn't move people. And I expected him to be a little bit more. So I was a little surprised. Looks like he just needs to fill out a little bit. A full off season maybe will help him get some of that strength. But short of that, I see Posick being a guy who's at least as good, if not better, of a pass protector than Jokel. But he's not the run blocker, and not that Jokel's some terrific run blocker, but he's better. He's more technical. I think he's a little more experienced, and so I think they are missing that. Yeah. And then Justin Britt. I don't think you can underestimate the guy playing on a bad ankle this week. And Pete even mentioned it this morning, or I think Monday morning, that he just didn't have the same power and push that he normally would have because of that ankle. So I think there's a few factors there that are contributing. Jeff, if the thing that we have to worry about is, can Tom Cable get the run game going? I'll take it. I certainly, you don't hear people say that Tom Cable doesn't know how to do run blocking or the run game. You hear that he can't do pass protection. So if he's going to figure out the run, if he got the pass protection figured out, and he's going to figure out the run game, let's give that a shot, because the other way certainly has not been working the past couple of years.
This line must drive Cable nuts. It's like pretty much the opposite of everything he's had his whole career.
Maybe so. I mean, maybe so.
So would you still roll with Lacey on the team?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm not what you'd call a Lacey lover. But I don't know if I'm ready to cut bait on him yet and just outright cut him. I think that with some decent blocking, he's still a viable back. Do I think Mike Davis might be a better option? Yeah, he might be. I'm not sure of it. And if the thing is, if you let Lacey go, he's gone. Yeah. And so I'm more inclined to keep him around for a couple more weeks and see what this line looks like, what the running backs look like with this line, and make sure that Thomas Rawls is able to stick around a little bit.
Yeah, I found myself far more frustrated with Rawls than I was with Lacey this last couple games. And maybe because my expectations of Rawls are different, and maybe it's unrealistic based on what he did a couple times last year and as a rookie. But, man, I expect more from him. That drop in the end zone was really bad. He had that terrible fumble in the Giants game. He took a terrible penalty on what should have been a touchdown to Richardson, although it was kind of a ticky-tack call. He to me, is more of a disappointment. Lacey kind of is what he is. He gets what's there. He blocks. He doesn't have speed. He doesn't have explosiveness. He's a straight ahead power runner. But Rawls looked like a guy who can really be a difference maker. And he's been too much of a disappointment, too not durable enough, too much of a non-factor. And I want to see more from him rather than Lacey. I think he's the one who irked me last Sunday for sure.
Yeah, I don't know that they're sorry. I'm going to try to get Dave on the phone. We're going to do something a little bit unorthodox here and see if it works. Okay. Give me 1 second. Let me give Dave a call and you tell us what you think about the Jeremy Lane debacle.
Well, there's two ways to look at it. It's unfortunate that they have to give up that pick. That third-round pick was really important based on they gave up that second-round pick for Sheldon Richardson. However, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world to have additional cornerback depth at this spot. If they could make the salary cap situation work, it's not the worst thing in the world. Although I was pretty disappointed. I think there was ways you could have filled that fifth cornerback spot with Deshaun Shedd nearing a return, Byron Maxwell still on the market. You could have got him at like a league minimum. So it's an unfortunate situation because Lane seemed to be just kind of drifting the way this team runs. His tweets last week after getting benched. Oh, and it looks like we're getting close to have Dave on. But I would have liked to see Lane just move on, start a new career in Houston. He's from Texas. He's family there. He visits a lot. I was kind of hoping for a fresh start for him. So it's a kind of a tricky situation. But I'm happy to have that fourth cornerback that can slide in. Now you have a nickel corner. If something happens to Justin Coleman, you got an outside guy. If something happens to Griffin, it's not the worst thing in the world, but definitely not what I wanted. And definitely not what Brian, who's been hard on Lane all year, wanted. And
yeah, the Lane, Jeremy Lane keeps on giving or taking one way or another. We're going to try something a little crazy here. Unfortunately, we couldn't get Dave on the show with video, just some technical difficulties. So we've got him on the phone here. I've got him up to the mic, and I'm going to ask folks online to tell me if they can hear him once we start this to make sure this is getting. Hopefully, Jeff, you can hear him. But Dave Boling is a former columnist of the Tacoma News Tribune, a guy that was often on the Seahawks roundtable on KJR for years. Worked with Mike Sando. I think they've been close. And Dave's a guy that has background playing offensive line back in the day, and has also become a novelist. A decorated novelist. So really an awesome resource in the Northwest. Super smart guy. I've always loved listening to him. And just welcome to the show, Dave. How you doing?
I'm doing great. I hope people can hear me, but unfortunately, I am what you would call technological terms an old fart. and so when you say get on Google Hangout, all of a sudden I started getting, I have to unblock the Sana Bougie vault and get into, that sort of thing. And it was in passwords, and I started saying bad words about halfway through it. But at any rate, I apologize for that. Maybe next time we can figure this out. I'm doing great. I don't know that I can be much help to you guys because I'm not out there at the Seahawks every day, and as I was for 30 some years. So
well, neither are we, Dave. But the point is, you were out there for 30 years, so you've got plenty to offer us. Don't you worry about that.
Oh, okay. It's a real interesting transition. As you say, I've got some other irons in the fire, and I'm, I had my second novel come out this summer. So the timing was pretty good to get finally downsized. It was, it was something I could see coming, and I had developed something of an escape route for myself as a writer. So I've been focusing on that, and maybe of some interest to your constituency. I've got a book deadline tomorrow, and it's a collaboration that I'm doing with the great Kurt Warner.
Of Seahawks fame or of Rams fame?
Yes, the C Kurt. And he and his wife Anna it seemed like they kind of disappeared for a good long time. And a couple of years ago, I got a call from him and said, "Hey, Dave, I remember you, and you've been recommending to me doing books. We want to do a book about our lives. And I said, well, what in the world have you guys been up to? And as it turns out, they didn't really, they weren't captured by a cult or anything like that, but they were basically in their house spending every day trying to get help for a pair of twin sons who were very low on the autism spectrum. And it's an amazing story how, the sacrifices they gave to try to get these kids well. And they were violent and they were self-injurious. And at one point, one of them set a fire that burned the house down.
Yep.
And through all this, they stayed married with two kids, and it's really a love story. And anyway, we wrote it up, and one of Amazon's imprints called Little A bought it, and tomorrow is the first deadline for copies. So I'm going through the last edit here, but I think it's something that Seahawks fans are really going to love. A look inside the life of a guy who has so much character, so much beyond what he did on the football field. It's really an inspiring story. So that's kind of what I've been up to these days.
That's amazing. And for folks that are listening, that know our show, Dave and I actually haven't even talked about our connection with autism and the work we try to do on the blog. But Dave, it's funny. I've met Kurt and I've talked to him about his experience. I as well have a son with autism, and I've also worked with Tracy Schneider and John Schneider on their Ben's Fund. All the proceeds we get from Hawk Blogger are donated to Ben's Fund. So we've donated over $60,000 in the past few years, and with a lot of folks listening, we've got a bunch of folks that are contributing this year, and we're hoping for a record year, hoping to raise $20,000 this year. So
wonderful.
It's great to hear that you're going to be sharing that story, and I love the way you put it. To stay married through that and keep a family together, I don't think people realize how turbulent that can be, and it takes a really special couple to do it. So it's great to kind of share those stories.
And, sacrifice. He could have been in, a national broadcast booth for the last 20 years. He's very articulate. And there's any number of things he could have been doing. But the number one priority was helping his wife raise those kids. And it's going to be a cool story. Amazon is committing to it, and they certainly know how to market and distribute books. So we think Seahawks fans, Penn State fans of people who have special needs kids, and anybody who really likes a good love story, I think is going to end up being drawn to this. So we're very excited about it, and congratulations for your good work on that. That's it's something I knew very little about, and now I know a great deal about. And it's I'm just stunned by these kids that deal with this, and the families are really heroes. And what they deal with and what they go through, it's heartbreaking and it's heartwarming at the same time.
Well put, and really looking forward. So when that comes out and it's available, please make sure you tag Jeff and I, and we'll make sure to spread the word about it as well. I know a lot of Seahawks fans would love to hear about it.
I'll do it. We should have it out by around the start of next season. So
terrific.
Yeah.
So
football.
Yeah. So turning our attention to football on the field for a second. Not everybody knows, your background, and, you have some, I know a lot of times questions around the offensive line got directed your way because you have some experience at that position. Share a little bit about, what your experience was on the football field, and then let's transition that into starting with what have you seen, assuming you've been watching the Seahawks this year, what have you seen from their offensive line before we get into the player they just traded for?
Okay. Yeah, I was a ball player. I grew up in Chicago. You know, it was kind of back in the old steel mill days, you know, in the neighborhood. Every block had a Big Ten offensive lineman practically, you know. And I ended up going to the University of Louisville to play under Coach Lee Corso. And,
no kidding.
We had a top 20 team, and he really got something started there. And I was no All-American or anything, but I was a center and a long snapper. Back when you would do both of those, it was kind of expected of a center to know how to snap. So I did all that stuff, and you know, I got banged up pretty good. I was probably too small, but I think you learn a lot by getting your ass kicked frequently. You know, it's you know, you hear people say they've been knocked down a lot in life. I'm talking not metaphorical knockdowns. I'm talking broken nose, bloody, kicked on your ass kind of knockdowns. You do learn a lot about yourself in those situations. And so, you know, I was always around sports. I was a grad assistant coach for a year at Louisville, and really enjoyed that. And I ended up getting into journalism and sports. And although as a columnist, I covered a lot of different things, and it was, you know, nothing but love for the Tacoma News Tribune, because they sent me around the world, the Olympics, 20 Super Bowls or whatever, and got to do everything anybody could ever hope to. But football was always my first love. And, you know, you mentioned that some of the beat guys I worked with. You know, I started the Trib with Clayton. Clayton and I he was the beat guy, and I was a columnist for 3 years. And when Mike Sando came, and Eric Williams, and a real legacy of really good beat guys. But I started with the Seahawks, really covering them hard in 1989, and probably staffed 400 games or more. Was at practice, almost every practice, for 21 years or more than that. So, you know, I go back a little ways, but I can't remember much anymore. So it's kind of the problem. But now this year I have not been out. I was out there during training camp, and I have been to a game, and I have watched most of the others, but I'm not breaking down film the way I used to. I've got these other projects that I'm working on that really demand a lot of my time. So I'm keeping an eye on them, and I'm hoping I can have an informed opinion, but it's not like I'm really breaking down films.
That's fair. Based on what you've seen, what was your impression of the way the Seahawks offensive line played? And talk about it as a whole group, or if there's any individuals specifically that you noticed, good or bad. Love to hear about it.
This week?
Over the course of the season, but if you'd like to focus on this week, that's fine too.
Well, again, for that team to be the 5-2, right?
Yep.
And their quarterback is still ambulatory and healthy.
Yep.
And he's taken a beating, and he's been pressured, and he is a magician. I sometimes am amazed that some people are critical about Russell. I've seen the quarterbacks that this team has had. I see how important it is to have a franchise quarterback, and this guy is a magician. And I think in some ways he's underpaid. I think in some ways he is underappreciated. I don't know how many quarterbacks last year. I thought, and I wrote this a couple times, that these injuries, you know what this is doing? This is giving him an opportunity that he hadn't had before to show just how tough he is and how willing he is to play hurt. And I think the season he had last year, under the pressure he had, with all those injuries, I think was heroic. And the fact that he is doing what he's doing now, with the pressure that he's taken, with the turnover on the offensive line, with the shortcomings that line has had, and without a running game, has been really MVP caliber. Depends on how far the team will go. But a lot of that is the line. I thought early in the year when I went to practice, there were two guys that I thought had really changed their bodies and were in for a big year. George Fant was one. He was, 315 or 320 and lean and powerful. He looked all of a sudden like an NFL tackle. He had a lot of work to do to become really adept at it, but he certainly looked like it. The other guy that I thought really had worked on his body and it changed was Jaron Reed, and I think he's been playing really well, and it's something you could see that his body was in good shape. So when Fant went down, I talked to Reese Adiambo, and I think he's a marvelous guy. I think he's a young guy. He's supposedly very strong, but I don't think he has great functional strength at left tackle. He's still top heavy. He still kind of blocks with his chin out. He doesn't understand even some of the little stunts and feeding the guy with, to the next man and knowing somebody is coming towards you. And these are things, and it's fairly typical around the NFL. There aren't enough good offensive linemen to sustain 32 full rosters, a complement of offensive linemen. And we know all the reasons, and it's the college game, it's a lack of contact during practices, training camp, etc. Those guys need to play. They need to play together. They have to pull together. It's like 5 fingers pulled into a fist. They have to work in coordination. And when you're plugging guys in, when you've got guys that are converted from some other position, when you're bouncing guys around, you just do not get that synchronization that you have to be effective. And I think that's at the root of the problems the Hawks have had.
That's so when you add a guy, you've got you're down the player that, you mentioned standing out. George Fant looked like he was going to be a new player, and you put in a guy like Reese Odiambo to step in there who's, never really started for the team, and he's struggling mightily. How realistic is it to expect, how much of a difference, I guess I would say, or ask, can one player like Duane Brown make by adding him, replacing someone like Odiambo and replacing him with someone like Duane Brown? How much of a difference can that make on the line?
Yeah. That's a great question, but I think it's significant because Brown will make the left guard better. And I kind of like Posick. I kind of like what he looked. He looks very athletic. He looks smooth. He reminds me of Pete Kendall a little bit.
It's a great comparison.
Body type. And I think he's got some savvy to him. So all of a sudden, if that kid can jump in and you've got Duane Brown, who's going to make the whole side better. If Russell can have a sense that there is somewhere where he can launch a pass, some area of protection, I think that's a big deal. You're right. It's hard. You know what? If there's 5 guys and one of them gets beaten badly, the play explodes. And that's true. But if you can lock somebody down, then you can run games and you can double and you can chip and work around some of those things a little more effectively. And when I thought Duane Brown looked pretty good for just coming out of nowhere in his first game, and you can just see he's got a great setup. He's got he's got really good hands. He is so veteran. He knows what he's doing. He doesn't panic. They ran a little in tackle stunt with a linebacker loop, and he just punched and fed the man off and waited, knowing somebody was coming his way, and just took care of it. I think it's going to be a big improvement. It will be interesting to see, how he fits in. The fact that they're where they are now, with what they've had, boy, you plug in a guy like that, and I think the chances are really good because it's not like Jari Evans when they brought him, or some of these older guys. He appears to have some mileage left on. So I think that's going to pick up the spirits in the room. I think Russell contributed to buying himself a left tackle, and I kind of like that symbolism. I think it's important, and like you wonder when you see Doug Baldwin going after Cable, and what is it that he was trying to say there, and you wonder, hey, can you get these guys to protect Russell? Can you buy us some time? That might have been it, and I think it's something good. These guys, I think they're in a really good frame of mind and feeling pretty good. I think they know they haven't been as consistent, and they're not at the level they would probably want to be right now. But I think they're pretty optimistic, and something like this could be a real emotional springboard for them into the second half of the season, I think.
Dave, I'm glad you brought up Cable because he is such a polarizing figure among fans and even some writers. So I want to know what your impression was him as a coach and just of how much he's had to do with like the lack of development on the line, or whether you think that's more of a personnel issue. Yeah, I just want to know your overall impressions of him when you were around him.
I'm a little bit of two minds about this, and it kind of varies from game to game. I watch him a lot. When you used to be able to watch practices all the time, I would spend a lot of time around the offensive line. And Tom Cable gives the impression that he's really this, this gruff, tough guy. He's very professorial. He teaches. I love his approach. He puts these guys in stress. When they're on the practice field, it's constant. It's going quick. Quick. Know your job. Know your assignment. Do it quickly. Execute it. And he tends to have guys that are pretty smart. And that's why over the years, when the offense has struggled in the first half, it seems like they reboot a little bit somewhere around the middle of the season and say, okay, we got to do what we do. And one time it was going to Marshawn all of a sudden 25 times a game. Another year it was, okay, we're going to run the zone reads. And to be able to make that kind of a change of focus in the middle of the season requires smart offensive linemen. And Cable has had that, and he has had those guys ready, and that has been a big part of why they've been better in the second half offensively most seasons. So I really think he's a good coach. I don't know what goes on in that room and who makes the decisions. I have to assume when they're looking at the scouting reports who they're going to draft. I don't like. I'm not just a big fan of the draft picks they've made on the offensive line, Carpenter, Moffitt. There've just been some. They have expended draft capital on the offensive line, and guys just haven't developed, or they've been slow to develop. And the theory of bringing converted defensive linemen over, I just have to believe there is an undrafted tackle from USC who really understands the game, who might be able to jump in, because if you're going to convert somebody and then you're going to need 4 years to teach them how to play the position, like a J.R. Sneedy, to where they can get competent, then you lose them. And you're either going to have to pay them that second contract that you may not want to. And so I think some of those philosophies, I tend to disagree, and I don't think they've worked out, obviously, not as well. But then you look at Justin Brett and what he's accomplished. It's one of the biggest surprises I've seen, his development as a center. He is a really fine center. He's a very high quality NFL center, and I thought he was going to wash out. He was on that James Carpenter expressway to somewhere else, going tackle to guard, and then not really finding his place. To become such a good center is a great testament to his, his tenacity and the fact that he realized he's got to find a place, and he has really made something very good of himself. So there's a lot of guys that didn't work out, And I don't know who's always responsible for that, but I have to think it's Tom Campbell.
Yeah, it's there's definitely a lot of debate, as you can imagine. He's a pretty polarizing figure among Seahawks fans. And Jeff and I were kind of joking beforehand. I published a stat years ago that Tom Cable had never had an offensive line in the NFL ranked higher than 26th in sack rate. Sacks per drop back. And he's just, it seems like it's been a blind spot. He always likes to prefer linemen that can run block over ones that can pass block. And now he's got the 12th ranked, line in sack rate, but they can't run block to save their lives. So, I'm curious, you mentioned Brown can be someone that can help with Posick on the left side. Are there other things that, just from a scheme standpoint, having played on the line, that if you have one player who's a Pro Bowl caliber player, does that allow you to, do more things with doubling or change things in the way you're attacking, the defense
Totally.
that could open up some more lanes?
Yeah, I think absolutely, totally. And I have not paid great attention to Duane Brown's career. I just haven't watched some of these guys. I know he's good. I liked what I saw on Sunday of him, particularly just coming out of the middle of nowhere. What are they going to do? They're going to have to come up. This is about the time every year where they decide who they're going to be. And now that they have a left tackle, I expect them to come out and have a little bit of a different focus. What's that going to be? I don't know. You saw them try a screen pass. My goodness, they ran a screen pass. And you wonder, why haven't they done that? And maybe that's something they give up. I thought last year, especially with Russell being immobilized part of the season, I thought they could do some more of those things. I think there are things they can do. I thought for a while, they were getting some better run blocking and creating better angles by running some of those wham plays with Luke Wilson coming across, and it's basically a tight end trap block, and that creates some angles. And I love when they come up with that sort of a thing. I think I like some of the stuff Texas was running.
Oh yeah.
Their offense with some of that motion in the back, a little bit of the jet sweep sort of a look, and then some misdirection and throwbacks and stuff. I think they need to watch that film and steal a few of those things, because Russell would be great at that. But I get the sense a lot of times with this offense, they're just learning themselves the first half of the season. They're not keeping the wraps on anything, but I think they are, they're feeling for openings. It's like the early rounds of a fight. Guys figuring out what's going to work, what isn't going to work, and then in the latter half really goes with what feels good and what suits them. And I thought the Jimmy Graham has been confounding in some ways, and I'm sure all the fans have dealt with that. And I kind of got the sense that after dropping one this game, it was like, okay, I have to be better. And it seemed like he almost switched the focus on or something. And I know players can't really do that. It seemed to me his involvement in winning this game looked like he was really attuned to being a Seahawk and to producing and to being Jimmy Graham again. And I may be making all this up in my mind just watching a game on TV. The way he came on and he and Wilson started screaming at each other, there was some joy there. There was some magic there. And that was not false emotion. That was Jimmy Graham really feeling good about helping this team win a game. And I think that might be kind of a theme entering this second half.
I think that's
Been terrific.
That's a fabulous point. It's a great call out. And do you have time for us to ask you 2 more questions? I know we kept you on a while.
Absolutely.
Cool.
No, absolutely.
So Jeff, I know you had one more question, then I wanted to ask an unrelated
and
one.
I'd like to say, if anybody has seen my mugshot in the newspaper, they're probably happy that they don't have to look at me on the video.
Hey, they're looking at us, Dave. It's not much better, I gotta say. It's okay.
All right.
Yeah, Dave, you've mentioned the running game a couple times. I remember in 2007, me and Brian mentioned this earlier. Mike Holmgren almost like ditched the running game and went with the 4 receivers and said, "This is how we're going to play." This team right now, their personnel seems to be much more adept at passing than running. Can you see a scenario where Pete Carroll does something like that, or are they going to just keep trying to bang their head against the wall until they figure this out?
I think they're going to bang their head for a while. I really do, but they have to win games.
Yeah.
And I think there's a real point to sticking with it. That's in Pete Carroll's DNA, as you know. They have that magic number that they talk about, and it's 50. You remember this thing where they win the game if they get a combination of 50 completed passes and runs. Okay, and it almost always works, and sometimes they do it with less. And it depends on defense and some other things. But I think that's how they would like to win. And the fact is, if you are not carrying the ball, then you're going to have to complete passes. If you can reach that sort of a balance, even if it's with fewer runs, I think they're going to be fine with that. They're not getting rushes out of Russell anymore. He used to be, 4 or 5 a game maybe, that would be run pass options or a zone read or actually a called run, a boot or something. So that is taking away some of the run threat that defenses haven't had to pay attention to. And last year they went away from it because he wasn't doing well. In years past, they kind of picked that up in the second half of the season because it was, we're at this point now, games get a little more important. And they may go with something like that to help open up the running attack. Who looks good running the ball? There's nowhere for them to go. There's very few holes. I don't see anybody. We saw a nice run or 2 out of McKissick and Carson. Chris Carson, is that his name?
Chris Carson.
Carson?
Yeah,
Carson. He was very promising. I haven't seen Rawls look like Thomas Rawls.
Yeah.
And Lacey is, I don't know, maybe he's too light now. I don't know.
I don't think that's the problem,
but
Dave.
they don't have it, and you've got to win games. You can be stubborn about it, but not to the point of losing football games. So I think they've got to get creative.
Well, so the last question I have for you is a bit of a departure, but it's obviously been a big story this season. And having listened to you for so long, I know that you're very thoughtful in how you consider options off the field as well as on. So one of the things I've always talked to fans about and I've written about that I love about sports is that for one day a year, for one day out of the week, for 3 hours, it doesn't matter what race, gender, religion, political affiliation, anything you come together, you're a brother or sister of the Hawk, you're wearing the colors, and you just, you unify. And, it's such a divisive culture right now. I think that just becomes even more valuable, over time. At the same time, you've got some incredibly serious social issues happening, and you've got players who are impacted by this and who want to use their position to bring attention to something that they believe is serious and obviously way more important than the game itself. I guess it's kind of a 2-part question. You can kind of take it how you want to go. One, what's your point of view on how to balance what sports is meant to be as an escape, and the political, the platform that these organizations have and these players have. And, over your course of all the years you've covered sports, have you seen anything like this in terms of the politicizing of sports, and what do you think this means?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's a huge essay answer.
Yep.
But here's my take on it, off the cuff. I hate seeing protests of the national anthem. I think there is symbolism to it, and people who, it is really not about the military. It is not about the police, but those people think it is. And there is some symbolism to it, and that means different things to different people. And I get that. And I hate that people feel the need to use that as a vehicle for protest. I was a journalist for 37 years, and I made a living as as one of the ink-stained crusaders for the First Amendment. I truly believe it is a free press, and the ability to have free speech is the cornerstone of a functioning democracy. I talked with Nate Boyer last spring, the snapper who tried to be a snapper for the Seahawks, who was a Green Beret, et cetera. And he's a very thoughtful guy, and he said, "You know what? Yeah, I see friends carried home in a coffin with that flag on top of them. That's what I think of." But he really said that people that he knew realized that the First Amendment, the right to protest, was a constitutional right, and that's part of why those people were fighting, what they were fighting for. And I truly believe that. And I think the Seahawks, from Paul Allen on down, I think showed what a class organization they are. I'm sure they don't want this. They don't want these kind of debates. They would love people to just go out and watch the games and to cheer for the teams and not have to deal with that. But Coach Carroll stands behind his players. John Schneider does. Paul Allen does. And the players they have, Baldwin, Sherman, Bennett, these guys are not just hellraisers. These are very thoughtful, bright people who recognize they have a platform and they have a voice, and there are serious social issues that affect everyone in the country, and they are actually working to try to make a difference. Now, part of it is drawing attention to the cause, and they found a way to do it. I don't know. I know Doug Baldwin doesn't like this stuff. His father was a cop. There are a lot of people from military families, and they are sensitive to that. It is not talk. It is actually trying to do something about severe social issues in America today, and I applaud these guys.
Yeah, it's definitely a complex issue, and I appreciate it. Even on the show, it's always a debate in my own mind whether to bring it up, because it's fun to stay focused on the team, but I'm really curious to hear your thoughts. Thanks for sharing those, Dave.
Those days are gone. It's not the wall between sports and the society that surrounds them has eroded, and how can it not? How can race issues not be a concern when the predominance the players are a minority? Of course they're going to. I'm glad they're concerned about problems that we're dealing with. It's a tough thing, but these guys, I love that you listen to Doug Baldwin when he's talking about de-escalation of conflicts in arrest between police and citizens. I mean, this guy, I think Doug Baldwin, in a lot of ways, I've done a column on this, I think he is the Steve Largent of the new millennium. I think he's having that kind of a career. It got started a little bit late, but I think he's a spectacular player. But he is someone also who could very easily, I think, end up in government somewhere if he chose to, as a politician. I mean, really just a very, very thoughtful human being. And I just think it has been, for me, a joy to cover these guys. I covered, until this year, I covered every press conference Richard Sherman ever had from the day he was drafted. And to see the thoughts, the way this guy's mind works, and some of the times he's a little bit out there because of his passion.
Yes, he is.
But so often, then you get in and you understand, then you talk to him some more, and you understand what it is that he's getting at and what's driven him. And there are a number of people on this team like that. So I think, regardless of the politics, I think people who are fans of the Seahawks can feel pretty good about the people they're rooting for.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Dave, for coming on and putting up with the technical challenges, and keep us in the loop about all the work you're doing. And let's, if we can, we'd love to have you back on another time.
Sure. We'll figure out how to do it.
Yeah. Well, I'll drive down your way and get you all figured out. So
all
right. Take care. Have a good night, Dave.
Take it.
Wow. So Jeff, that was awesome. Lots of good stuff there from Dave. Guy that I have a ton of respect for, and I've listened to him. I can't tell you how many times I listened to him on KJR, and let's just say I miss him. I was glad to be able to bring him on the show today.
Yeah, that was awesome. It's always, we've got some great guests on the show, but like you, even though I've lived in Toronto, I've always listened to those Seahawks roundtables for as long as I can remember. I've always been able to download them, or we can't listen live in Canada. We're geo-blocked, but he offered just a unique perspective, especially on the offensive line, that no one else in the media has, in Seattle at least, has been able to offer. And I've always found him to just be such a fascinating media guy, a little different than a lot of the reporters who usually cover a team. So that was really cool for me.
Yeah, he's one of the things I love about Dave is he's just bright. He's smart, and he's articulate, and you can tell he looks at the game from a little bit of a different angle than the typical beat writer or columnist. I don't want to tear anyone down, but there's some columnists out there now in the local area, and it's like all they do, some of these folks, is they just look for something negative or some kind of provocative take to put out there. And it's not, maybe it's functional from the way the business works that they get more clicks, but I'll call out one this morning. I opened the paper the day after, 2 days after, an amazing win for the Seahawks, where the offense scores 41 points and Russell Wilson does something that's never been done before in the history of the sport, throwing for 450 yards and running for 30. And the top column was, the Seahawks did well, but they won't get anywhere without a run game.
I saw that. I rolled my eyes too.
I mean, that's what you're talking about right now. Like, just shove it. It's like, save that. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm just too much of a glass half full guy, but like, who wants to read that right now?
I don't know how you can come out of a game. And I used to cover games in my old job. I covered teams. I covered games. I don't know how you can possibly watch that game as a columnist, where your job is to do opinion, not like interview players, and come up with that. I don't know how you can do that. And that's what made Dave and some other guys, like he mentioned, Sando and Clayton and Sheil Kapadia, so unique and so good. And yeah, I don't know how you can watch Russell Wilson have the game of his life and one of the best quarterback duels we've seen in a long time and think, oh, they're not going anywhere until they fix their running game. They legitimately just scored 40 points without any running game.
Right. There's no way they can win, though, Jeff. I mean, they went up against a top 10 DVOA defense and put up, almost 500 yards and 41 points. So there's no way.
Exactly.
It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And I mean, let's run through. I mean, the top storylines for you. I'll go through a couple that hit me. We talked about Paul Richardson, right? I think that's a huge story. Tyler Lockett goes for 121. I think that's a big story. I think that Russell Wilson, breaking out isn't just great now. I think there's evidence. You and I have talked about it. There's evidence of him starting to look like the player that we saw at the end of 2015. How many times have you and I asked each other just this year, are we ever going to see that again? Was that some kind of mirage?
Yeah.
He might be in the middle of that right now. Mm-hmm. I could keep going. Frank Clark, Richard Sherman getting 2 picks, Earl Thomas, getting his pick 6. On down the line, Ethan Posick having another great game in pass protection. Posick is the 10th ranked offensive guard in pass protection over the last 2 weeks. 10th. Mm-hmm. This is huge for this team. Those are all things we're better to write about right now than, whether we can run the ball.
And it said a lot. And Peter King writes that Monday morning column it's been how long has that column been going on for?
Oh, man. And time.
That's a legendary column if anyone who reads sports at all. He led the column with Russell Wilson, the Russell Wilson-Watson battle. So I don't know how the league, of all the stories to cover in the league, that's the number one story. And now you have our local coverage, or your local coverage, leading with the run game, which for me, it's any story you do in that game to me has to be Russell Wilson. That was the best and most exhilarating game that he's probably ever played in the regular season. There's been other great ones. There's that New England game his rookie year. There's been some crazy games along the way, that Pittsburgh game we mentioned. But, man, I can't remember. And a last-second victory like that where they scored 20 seconds left after he throws what almost was a game-ending interception. Ugh, it's got to be real. And Paul Richardson's a great call. I'm very, very happy you brought that up. I've been so impressed with Richardson. I was looking at this earlier. Richardson has more touchdowns this year than Antonio Brown, Julio Jones, AJ Green, and there's someone else high on that list, that Larry Fitzgerald. He's got 5 touchdowns. None of those guys have more than 4.
Yep.
And 2 were last game. He could have had 3 last game, but he's really developed into a nice player. And I was listening to a show with Mike Lombardi, who's one of my favorite football analysts personally, and after he raved about Wilson for 20 minutes, the thing that he kept talking about was how good Paul Richardson looked as a down the field threat, how good his route running has become, and how good his hands were. And to jump over that guy in that last drive to kickstart that whole thing. Man, he's become such a nice player, and it's nice to see that late season surge last year when Lockett went down doesn't look like a fluke at all.
Yeah, I mean, that's huge. I think it's crazy to think that he's on pace for 10 to 11 touchdowns this season. Yeah. I mean, that's big. And over the last 2 weeks, top 2 players in the NFL. It's only 2 games, but it's still top 2, not 1 and 5 or 1 and 10 or 1 and 15. Number 1, number 2 in receiving touchdowns. Paul Richardson and Jimmy Graham both have 3 touchdowns in the last 2 weeks. So small sample size, all that's all absolutely true, but it's interesting. And I was curious, Dave Boling brought up his read on Jimmy Graham. I thought it was an insightful comment. I'm curious what your thoughts were. I hadn't really thought about the emotional connection he seemed to show in that game. What was your read on what Boling said and just about how Graham played in that game in general?
I thought it was a really good, smart take on the whole situation. And Graham's, I know Pete and I think Pete has talked about this a lot. I think Jimmy really struggled with the trade rumors all year. And I think Pete even had to talk to him before the game. I know Ian Rappaport had tweeted Sunday morning that the team was trying to trade him to get a left tackle. I know we've talked about that. You've talked about that. And Jimmy's a guy who when things are going against him, he's had a tendency to hide from expectations, and to have that on that day where rumors are coming out that the team's trying to move him and to break out with the game-winning touchdown. I think there was a ton of emotion in that game for him. And yeah, maybe this was the moment where he truly became that Seahawk, and the whole team really – you saw how quickly the team dispelled that rumor, which was surprising because it was a logical rumor given how everything was shaping out. So yeah, I thought that was a really good point by Dave, something that I definitely had not thought of. And I just love how the team's come around and kind of built around him and this techno dance they got going on right now. And how awesome was Russell Wilson playing the flute?
How awesome was that the most human thing that you've seen Russell do? Right? I mean, like,
you know what? He's really come around this season. I remember there was that thing in Tennessee where he led the pregame meeting on what to do with that. On the kneeling situation, there was the F-bomb in the Colts game.
Yep.
Today he dresses up as Pete Carroll.
Yep.
I don't know if you saw that. And then
the video for him Halloween. Yeah, it was great.
He's coming out of his shell this year.
Yeah, I don't know if you've got a family, Jeff, but there is something that changes when you get married and you have kids, and it has a way of having pretty profound impact on your worldview, namely that you're not the center of the world anymore. I'm wondering if that's part of it. If there's been so much concern about how his relationship with Sierra was going to be a distraction or causing problems, maybe it's grounding him. Maybe it's helping him let his walls down a little bit and get more comfortable in his own skin. And whatever it is, it's been fun to see. And I the flute thing of all of those things really got me because it was so silly, and he looked so foolish, and who cares? I mean, that's the point, is like, it is a joyous moment. You're celebrating with your team, and you don't care what anyone thinks or what I'm sure the guys have that on loop in the film rooms, giving them all sorts of crap. And that's great. I mean, that's part of the camaraderie that you want to see building at this team as they head towards what we hope is a resounding finish.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw the video on Thursday. The team's Twitter account tweeted it out. It was like a clip from practice where the tight ends put Tanner McAvoy in like a box and start dancing around him and playing the flute. And watching the tight end coach, Pat McPherson's face while this is all happening, he has no idea what's happening. And this video service Thursday, I've probably watched it like 20 times already. It's absolutely hilarious and totally ridiculous. I think McAvoy's wearing a jersey that says Macklemore on it. I don't know that. Yeah.
Luke
so
Wilson,
there's something going on with that. Yeah, they're just something fun about this team again, and like it seemed like they're really bonding, and it was cool to see like the tight end group has brought this offense together, and like I don't know if it's stupid dances or whatever they're doing, but they're just so much fun to watch for and root for right now. And there's so much bad publicity sometimes surrounding the NFL, and this team, whether it's making blockbuster trades or last minute vic, there's so much to like about this team right now. They're such a fun team to be supporting of.
Yeah, it reminds, as you're talking, I was thinking a little bit about the real Rob report and how much I miss that, and you how much would you pay to have Luke Wilson get a camera and walk around inside that locker room? I mean, that it would be awesome. I'm pretty sure they banned anyone from doing that ever again.
Sherm's had some cool stuff.
That's true. That's true.
He's had like the little Real Rob report, like the similar feel to it on those videos he's been doing, but they're only like 1 minute videos, not the same.
Not quite the same. You don't have him trying to get Marshawn to talk on air, all that kind of fun stuff. But yeah, like, look, we've been going a while here, and I want to, we should close with a few items. I mean, we've got the trade. I think we've talked about that quite a bit, and I think this is huge. I think the Seahawks get immediately better. I think this defense is still quite good. We've got a Washington team coming in who's dealing with all sorts of injuries. This is a team that's actually been really pretty potent on offense. Kirk Cousins has had a really strong year. Maybe not what people realize, but he's been playing pretty well and dealt with a lot of dropped passes, which could have had an even better year. His offensive line's almost completely out injured. And then, Seahawks go to Arizona. They don't have Carson Palmer. Then they have Atlanta coming in who've been struggling. And, then they go down to San Francisco, who just got Jimmy Garoppolo, which is interesting. I don't know if you feel any different, but I don't think that really changes significantly that team's trajectory. But it's certainly better than Hoyer.
Yeah.
There's a real chance we're heading towards this Philadelphia game, Sunday Night Football on December 3rd, where the Eagles could be a 1-loss team and the Seahawks could be a 2-loss team, and that could be the game that essentially is deciding home field advantage for the NFC.
Yeah, everything points to that right now because you mentioned Drew Stannon's playing in Arizona. That team with Palmer wasn't much of a threat, in my opinion. Without Palmer, they have no chance. Drew Stannon's terrible. There's writers on that team who think Blaine Gabbert's a major upgrade. Washington, unfortunately, I thought that was going to be a really good test, and it still might be, but they're really banged up. You mentioned the offensive line. They're missing Jonathan Allen, too, who's been a really, really impressive rookie on the defensive line. He's out for the season. Josh Norman's been banged up. Yeah, he hasn't really played this year, and Terrell Pryor's been an absolute zero for them. Jordan Reed, who's a guy who's the kind of player who usually gives the Seattle defense a lot of trouble. He's hurt too. So it's Vernon Davis who's on his last legs in the NFL, and they're really banged up. Yeah, you're right. Although it's a quick turnaround for the Thursday game of the road in Arizona. Right now it looks like Seattle and Philly and maybe Minnesota are the teams to watch in the conference. Yep. But you're right. I think that Seattle-Philly game, especially being in Seattle, that could be the game that determines the number 1 seed. And when Seattle gets that number 1 seed, they've pretty much gone to the Super Bowl. I think they've gone to the Super Bowl every time they've had the number 1 seed in the conference. I know 2005, 2013, 2014. That's probably the game that decides it.
Yeah, I honestly, if I look at the rest of the schedule, the 2 toughest games to me, I'll go 3 toughest, but the games that jump out to me are at Jacksonville.
Yeah.
This is a team that already was a monster on defense. They added Marcel Darius, who may or may not have any interest in playing good football anymore. But if he does, he's a monster. And then you got home against the Rams. Between the Rams and Philly, I actually think the Rams are a more concerning opponent. I think Aaron Donald's better than Fletcher Cox. I don't think that's too hot of a take. I think that the Rams defensive line is better than the Eagles defensive line. I think that Todd Gurley's better than Ajayi or whoever else there, LeGarrette Blount. I think that Eagles didn't go out and get a left tackle as far as I know. They're down Jason Peters. Andrew Whitworth is a better player. I think the one important position where Philly's better than the Rams is quarterback, and Wentz is legit. I think he's a good player. He came in here, played pretty well last year. But that Rams team is tough, and I think that you guys all laughed at me. I think that Jacksonville game is going to be real tough on the road.
No, I think they're a really hard team to play against, and the kind of teams that can beat Seattle are the teams with those dominant defensive line groups. And yeah, I know Blake Bortles is the guy everyone likes to laugh at, and they almost win in spite of him, but they got that formula that those Rams teams have had over the years, and that's kind of how you beat this team. But I think of all the games, that's probably the least important game from a positioning standpoint. It's an out-of-conference game. So if you're going to lose one, I'm very okay if you're going to lose that game, right?
Right, and I think that's the question is, can they lose one? That's going to be, 13 wins tends to be home field advantage, and we were talking earlier that it didn't seem like anyone was going to get there. I can see a path now for a few teams, Philly and maybe the Rams and the Seahawks. I think the Vikings might as well. I mean, Detroit's fallen back. Green Bay is obviously nothing anymore. The Bears have been an interesting team this year. They've been tougher than I think most of us expected. but the Vikings and Rams play each other, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, so check out this schedule. The Rams, they play at New York this week, which is probably a victory for them, the Giants. After that, here's their run. They're home to Houston. They play at Minnesota. They play home to New Orleans, at Arizona. They play home to Philly, and then at Seattle. That is a crazy schedule.
That's true. That seems like a
could be
couple
4
losses in there for sure.
Yeah. That's a ridiculous schedule.
Wow. Rams, Texans.
Yeah, that's not easy, man.
That is going to be an interesting.
It's probably 5 of the 6 best teams in the league, other than maybe New England and Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I don't know what to make of Pittsburgh. That's another whole conversation.
I know. Ben looks like a guy who's just like lost his jump shot and is hanging on.
We'll deal with the AFC when we have.
Yeah, we don't need to worry about that yet.
But yeah, I think this is the only time all year the Seahawks are going to have back-to-back home games. We're going to get to see Duane Brown slid in there at left tackle, and let's just close on this. The part of the Duane Brown. What's the part of the Duane Brown deal that makes you most excited? Like, what specific impact are you hoping to see his effect on the team that's going to make a difference?
That Reese Odiambo's on the bench. Okay, seriously, just to have a stable, I think John Schneider called him a mountain of a man. To have a guy like that, where you're not every time the guy's rushing, you're fearing for your life as a fan. Just to have the stability, that for me makes a world of difference, because when they had Okung, you didn't appreciate it, I don't think, enough. And that's just natural because you don't realize what you've got until it's gone, and that whole thing. But just to have that stability there, I think makes a world of difference.
Yeah, I think the thing that I'm most looking forward to is just the idea of getting more players out into pass patterns without having to chip or without having to stay back. I think that having a guy like Brown can mean Jimmy Graham is not chipping on his way out on routes. He can just go out and detach and run them. It means that J.D. McKissick or C.J. Prosise, if he ever makes it back, don't have to stay in to block or stay back an extra click to chip. They can go out in routes, and I think that has a potentially massive impact. And I could go into impact in the running game. It'd be great to see what we could do there, but we started the show talking about how great of a deep passer Russell Wilson is. He's already getting really good pockets to throw in right now and making some big plays. This is going to give Darrell Bevell, I think it's going to open up an entire part of the playbook that he's basically just shut off because he knew he couldn't call those plays with the type of player he had at left tackle. So I'm really excited. I think this could be, maybe the best stretch of Seahawks offense in a while. And I looked at past defenses that the Seahawks are going to face. 5 of their final, 9 games or whatever it is, are against past defenses from a DVOA standpoint or efficiency standpoint, or 22nd or worse in that department. So, and almost all of them are, bottom 15. Only the Rams and the Jaguars are, top 10 pass defenses that they're going to face the rest of the year. So, I think they can make some hay. And with that, I think we're going to put a wrap on this week's show. Appreciate everyone hanging with us while we found a way to get Dave on there. Hopefully you guys enjoyed him. Please, if you haven't already, subscribe. Click down there to subscribe. More people that subscribe, that share the show, grow the audience. The bigger the guests that we're going to get on. We're already getting a lot of great folks. Got some other folks lined up that are still coming. But we also just want to grow the community. So, there's a chat. It's been great getting to know and see some of the regulars come on there. And if there's people you'd love to see us try to get on the show, please let us know that as well. But you can find Jeff on Twitter at Real Jeff Simmons, and me, as you know, is at Hawk Blogger. And keep an eye out for all the great stuff we got coming. And man, can't wait till Sunday. See you later,
Yeah.
Jeff.
Yeah, man. Shout out to John Schneider for that trade.
Yes. Thank you, John. Cheers, all.